Welcome to Lift Your Story Podcast with guest Christian de la Huerta, author, transformation coach, and retreat facilitator. Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Ann. I am that gal from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we welcome Christian de la Huerta, and he is an author, transformation coach, and retreat facilitator. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Lorianne and Roy. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Great. So I've got to ask you, are you ready to reclaim your power and release the hero inside you? So tell us about the hero.
Well, this book that I wrote, Awakening the Soul of Power, is the first of a series of 3. And the series is titled Calling All Heroes. So it talks about what it means to live heroically in the 21st century, when most of us don't have a horse hitched outside, and certainly we don't have the armors and the demons to slay, except the ones in our own heads. And it's one of the ways in which the pandemic has served us. It's kind of expanded the way we think about what heroism means. I think before that, most of us would think of like a superhero with, a cape and that 3-point landing. And then, maybe warriors or first responders. Now we include our healthcare practitioners, our doctors, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, who have literally put their bodies and their lives at risk to take care of the rest of us. And, I think some of us even include like delivery people and grocery store clerks who made a lot of sacrifices in their own personal lives to keep the rest of us fed and supplied for. But what about the rest of us? So this book talks about that, about what it means to live heroically in the 21st century. And this first one is focused on personal empowerment.
Okay. So it's, mindset, I'm assuming, is a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of mindset, a lot of understanding who we are and what makes us do the things we do, like understanding, the patterns of behavior. Like it's really easy to go through life completely buffeted by lives ups and downs. To live life consciously, to ask the hard questions, who are we? What are we doing here? What is my life purpose? What triggers me? What makes me do the things we do? What are my patterns? What are my patterns in relationships? What does it sometimes feel like I've in the same boring movie, with the same kind of arguments and conflicts? It's just with a different player, a different actor, but it's the same kind of stuff. So at some point we got to get honest and look at ourselves and say, hey, there's one common denominator in every one of these relationships, in every one of these arguments, and it's right here, right? So why do we do the things we do? And so those, they're not easy questions, and it takes courage. It takes the willingness to look inside and face down those inner demons. And as far as I'm concerned, that is nothing short of heroism.
Yeah, you're talking about patterns of behavior and then being able to look at those, like you say, honestly and work through them. Because it's always harder to see what's wrong with you than it is to see what's wrong with everyone else.
Yep, exactly. That's the definition of a blind spot, which we all have. It's a lot easier to see it over there than it is to see it over here.
Yeah.
I had an interesting question asked of me about look at the people around you. And I came to realize that a lot of them are empaths. A lot of them are very kind and very giving. I realize I don't really surround myself with anybody but those people. But at one time in my life, it wasn't that way. And, it sort of dissolved those relationships. But I don't know if I did that unsuspectingly, realized that, that was what I needed to do to make things better, or if it was something that I was conscious about not realizing it was, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. I can relate to that. I resonate with that trajectory. And I think, Lorianne, is like, as the more that we grow, the more that we evolve, the stronger and the deeper that our sense of self, our self-esteem, our self-love, then that's what we attract. And I think it's kind of a natural process that as we go further along that path of spiritual evolution, then we start attracting people who are a match for that. And so there's a lot less drama, a lot less, of other people's stuff and their expectations, their judgments. We become, our lives are a reflection of who we are. It's another way of saying that.
Yeah. Well, I know for me personally, the older I got, I can think back and see how I changed. Stuff that used to drive me nuts, now I could care less about, So,
Exactly.
No big deal. Who cares? Whatever. It's not
Exactly.
worth getting upset, getting excited about. It's just the drama. I hate drama, period.
Yeah, me too. And I think, Roy, you're speaking a lot of wisdom too. I think part of it is a function of aging, and just we start realizing how precious the time that we have here on this planet is, and this journey of embodiment. I think it's also the more that we do our self-work and our self-healing, we flatten those buttons. So those buttons that anybody could trigger, would identify us and press and trigger us and get us, the more that we do our work of self-awareness and self-healing, then those buttons get flattened. And what used to bother us, what used to bug us, no longer does.
Yeah. I think I'll use Facebook as an example. People you knew 50 years ago, without Facebook, you would have never reconnected with them or whatever, but now you have, and I've come across people that I may knew who they were. I didn't really know them personally, but through Facebook, I've got to know them. And I'm thinking, gosh, what if I would have known them back when I was in high school? What if I'd have known them then? What would it have been like between now and then, it's amazing the difference and the difference in the people, like say the cheerleader types, the football types, now that if you see them, they're just like no different than you, really. I mean, that was then, and it's different now. They're way past all that, and they'll even laugh about stuff that happened, So, and I do think a lot of that is maturity, age. I think you quit caring what people think. You're just a whole different. Your mindset has totally opened up and changed. And I think when we talk about heroes, I see now where you can look back and think, well, that guy, he is a hero. He was able to overcome this or overcome that,
Yeah. And that's one of the ways in which I talk about heroism. And you're absolutely right. Like somebody said, I forget who said, but that youth is wasted on the young. It's like what I would give to know then what I know now. It's like, oh my God.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's just part of that process of growth and evolution. We just get clear about who we are, and what works for us, what doesn't work for us, what's negotiable, what's not negotiable, who we want to hang around with, what we do want to do with our lives. And it's like our lives change when we're willing to go through that process, which is heroic in my perspective.
Now, saying that about, knowing then what I know now, I think it's sometimes also good that you don't, because it would freak you out knowing what might be coming. Like, I think that innocence and that not knowing is what kept us going until this point of knowing, right? Because I'm telling you, when I look at my life, I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm glad I didn't know how that ship was going to fall.
Well, yeah, it's like one of my sons, like when he was a teenager, I told him, I said, look, you think I don't know anything? I said, believe me, I was 1, 2, 3, 4. I wasn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 40. I was 16 too. I know exactly what you're going through, and I said, you're going to figure out that the older you get, the smarter I'm going to be. So when he had his own kids one time, and he said, boy, Dad, you're right. You were smarter than I thought you were.
Yeah. I hear you, Lorianne. And I think net, I think I wish I would know then I wish I could know then what I know now. I think it would have made my life so much easier.
Yeah. I agree. But we're all doing the best we can at the time, right?
Exactly. And that too is part of maturity and part of understanding who we are. the once we understand that the ego mind that is so judgmental and so harsh and so cruel, not only with each other, but worst of all with ourselves, that the things we tell ourselves inside our heads, we would never say to anybody else. So once we understand those patterns and what triggers them, then there's a softening that happens. And that's one of the ways in which I think about and hold forgiveness. Because the ego mind is so harsh, and it appoints itself a judge, a jury, and prosecutor. It knows exactly what you did that was wrong, what the punishment should be, and delivers it. And so it's very separate and feels superior or sometimes inferior. But once we get what you're talking about, Roy, that once we get to that level of softening and saying, you know what, just putting in place of that harsh judgment, we just put in a question mark. You know what, maybe, I don't know, I can't imagine that I would ever be that way, but maybe. If I had been raised in their family, in their culture at that particular time, with whatever patterns in brain biochemistry and addictions were, and whatever information they had access to, maybe I would have turned out the same way, maybe. And even just being willing to put that little question mark, it softens that harsh edge of judgment. And it's like, ultimately, it's what you're saying. We place ourselves in our shoes and we just say, you know what, we're all doing the best that we can. And sometimes it sucks. but ultimately, it's like, who am I to judge? Like somebody else's experience in life.
Well, I've often thought back, well, if I would have done this at this time instead of what I did, or later on, if I'd have done, you always wonder, well, would my life really have went a totally different direction?
Yeah.
With that one decision at that time.
Yeah. Isn't that just another number that we do in ourselves? What if?
I've learned not to do that because it literally was causing me severe anxiety. I mean, I lost my business at 48. At 48, I lost everything. And it was a very dark time. And I thought, well, what if I hadn't bought that business? What if and then I'm thinking, stop it, because all that's doing is churning and making me feel worse and worse about myself. Now I look at it, I go, wow, I did that. I bought that business. I took the risk. It was a scary loss, but during the period of time I owned it, it was exciting. It was, a lot of fun. And not a lot of women would do what I did, which was, run an auto repair shop. So in a small town, I didn't know anyone. So you have to sort of look at the positives of what happened, the positive experience of it. But it took some time for me to get there because, that what if, and then I think, my ex-husband and I, we divorced, and I thought, well, what if, if we hadn't got married, I wouldn't have my 3 kids. And I don't have what ifs about what would it be like to be married to my first love, because he was. So I've got a what if that's crossed out of my list, right? So it's like,
yeah. No, that's it. We drive ourselves insane with those second guessing and that what ifing. It's like it's just like a fruitless exercise. It's like it's done. It's like the past is gone and will never be again. So what you're saying is so wise. It's like, what can I learn from it? Right? And if we approach life from that perspective, there are no failed relationships. There are no failures, as long as we're growing from it and learning how to do things better, how to become better human beings. Then there's no mistakes.
I'm really curious, what inspired you? Because obviously you've taken a lot of time and learned a lot about yourself. What inspired you to write this book? What brought you to this?
Well, it's an interesting, really good question, because I'm an unlikely person to be writing about personal empowerment and what it means to live heroically. I was born in Cuba, so the first 10 years of my life in Cuba, for which I'm really grateful, actually, because I was raised in a communist country, so we had few toys. But the upside of that is that, we grew up reading and we grew up inventing and creating our own games and pastimes. And for that, I'm really, really grateful. Like I see these kids today just with their face buried in this phone screens or their computers. And it's like, oh my God, like life is going by so fast. And so, but it was like in Cuba, it was a communist, totalitarian, autocratic regime. So power down. And no discussion. Like talk about so many of the rights that we take for granted here in the US and other democracies. Like to speak about personal empowerment is like laughable. in one of those regimes, in one of those countries. And also my family was very Catholic. So again, I'm one of 9 kids. So again, a very authoritarian, very not dictatorial, but very hierarchical power structure. And when we came to the States, like I didn't speak a word of English. And I can say that my life, my adolescence was one long depression, like with suicidal thoughts, as I tried to figure out who I was, and where I fit in. Because one of the things that I was struggling with, even at a young age, was knowing that I was gay. And so trying to reconcile a place for myself in a religion that told me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity. And I wouldn't wish that painful, long adolescence depression on anybody, but the upside of that, right? So is what we were talking about before, is like, what was the good? What was the silver lining? Is that it forced myself to ask these existential, deep questions at a very young age. And so in a way, I was able to navigate that and to land on such a profound level of self-acceptance and self-love that, like, it's pretty unshakable these days. Like, no matter what happens in my life, no matter what the details, the circumstances, a relationship works out or it doesn't. A project or a business succeeds or it fails. Never, ever, ever anymore do I question myself, my sense of self. Like, my self-worth is unshakable and established. And that process is part of what I share in this book, because I know, I mean, this isn't stuff I read in a book or something. I mean, this is stuff that I live, teachings that I know work. So no matter what happened in our lives, no matter what challenges we had to overcome, I know, and also looking forward, no matter what challenges and curveballs life will continue to throw our way, we can always, all that stuff can be healed, and we can always land with a stronger sense of who we are. And all that stuff can be transcended no matter what it was. And so that's part of the message of the book, and part of the way that I walk the reader by the hand. I've designed the book in a very manageable way. I know how busy and overscheduled everybody is. So very short chapters. You can usually do one short chapter a week, but I would say do the practices, and it doesn't take long. It might take you 10, 15 minutes to do the questionnaires at the end of each chapter, the power practices, or maybe it's just the thing that you think about in the back of your mind as you're driving to work or wherever you're driving. But that's what assures the transformation. So, and assures that those teachings that I share in the book don't stay at the level of information, because we don't need more information. We've got information overload. What we need is transformation, and that comes from integrating teachings into our lives, and that's what those practices are designed to do.
I love books like that I can write in, and and you go back, I go back to some 2 years ago, and I'm going, oh my goodness, I've changed. So like, that's not how I think anymore too much,
Exactly.
or I'm the same, like certain other areas. But those are great, because not only like you said, writing down helps in the transformation, but it's also fun that, a couple of years from now, you go back to it and you really see the growth.
Exactly. As we get to gauge how far we've come. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, you do like a journal. If you do journaling, you can go back, a year ago today, what was I thinking, what was going on, and you're going, wow, I can't believe I was there, now, looking back, how can I be like that? I'm nowhere near that person now.
Yeah.
Because that, that growth, I mean, every day you have the opportunity to grow and change.
Yeah, yeah. And it's because what we're talking about before that, because we're in our lives, because we're in the gradual day by day process, sometimes we don't notice how much we've grown. So that's one of the benefits that we're talking about. We're writing it down, or having a credible coach or a mirror or a therapist, or even a good friend that you can bounce ideas with. It gives us a sense of gauging, like, how far we've come, because we forget. It's easy to forget.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're working on the here and now.
Exactly.
I mean, the moment, when if you've passed that to now, to a few minutes from now is different than now. I mean, it's just, you're moving on, always moving forward. hopefully,
Yeah.
theoretically.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the idea. That's the idea. And I don't think that process ever stops. And I've been doing weekend retreats, transformational retreats for the last over 30 years now, and they're really amazing. They really are life changing. And another thing for which I'm grateful for the pandemic is that what I've known and I've needed to do for years was developing online programming, virtual programming. If I was going to reach people who might live in a part of the country or the world that they may never come to one of my retreats. So COVID kind of forced my hand, because all of a sudden, like no retreats, no income. So I had to pivot fast and start creating programming. And I'll go back to doing retreats when it's safe to do so. And here's what I'm valuing, which is what we're talking. It connects to what we're talking about, which I'm really appreciating about doing the year-long program. I developed a year-long coaching program. Because what I noticed sometimes is that people would come, in some cases, they would have an amazing transformational experience, life-changing, and if they didn't have a support system, if they didn't have a coach, if they didn't have a practice when they went back into their lives, if they didn't have the reminders or structure system of accountability, very easy to forget and to be pulled back and get distracted by life's infinite distractions and the day-to-day responsibilities. And then pretty soon, if we're not paying attention, those old voices of fear and self-doubt and those self-sabotaging behaviors start creeping up again and dragging us down. And then they'd have to come do another retreat. And so what I'm loving about this concept of a yearling is I get to stretch out the teachings, deliver it piecemeal, bite-size. So not similar to the book, just a little bit of content each week, but two key differences. One is the interactivity. So related to those practices we were talking about before, that are designed to integrate and apply the teachings to our lives. The other one is accountability. So coaching calls with me every couple of weeks to keep people accountable, doing what we said we were going to do. And we all need that. I need that. So I've got my own business coaches that keep me doing keep me accountable and doing what I said I was going to do. I'm grateful for having had to design this system.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just going to ask you about that, because somebody goes and they go to the retreat. I mean, and they do really make a transformation. I mean, it's very obvious. They tell you afterwards. But then they go back home, and then there's that chance that it was all great last weekend, but this weekend, oh crap, I got this, and it's like it's just gone because they've left that experience, and like you say, no accountability, no follow-up, and they just go right back to where they were. So right. I think that's a great idea what you're doing.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm grateful for having kind of been forced by life to do it, and and going forward, I say doing both. I will go back to doing retreats, and the year-long stretched out system is a great one.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with that too. I know that I've gone through therapy, and COVID kind of forced me into that. And it was great. And it was, I don't have childhood traumas or anything. It's just I do deal with some anxiety. So it really helped. But after the 12 weeks, I was good for about a month. And then I start to feel it again, because you don't have that continual, like you said, the support in that. And I think that is important to maintain where you're at. You get this great space and not to lose that. Yeah.
And that's because we start feeling good. Mm-hmm. But the practices or the new teachings or the new understandings haven't really taken yet. So then we start feeling better, and then we stop going, or we stop doing whatever it is that we started doing, and then we slip back into old patterns of behavior and being, and that's the benefit of doing it over a year long. Like it really, like my business coach. Like I was thinking at the time of creating a 6-week program. And, I was kind of struggling, going back and forth about what has so much amazing life-changing content. I was kind of stuck in what to put in, what to leave out. And she asked me a question just pointedly. Well, what would you feel more confident assuring transformation after a 30-day program or a year-long program? And it was like a no-brainer. I didn't have to think about it. Like in a year-long, I can do so much more and take people on such an incredibly much more profound journey of transformation. So that's when I decided to focus on the Yearling. Now I'm also creating a shorter 5 or 6 week program to, to help, because part of what drives me is that global transformation. When I look at the world and all the challenges that we're facing, and just any one of them is completely overwhelming, just like environmental stuff. And so I think about, like paraphrasing Einstein, that we can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness in which it was created. So when I think about all these issues, and so the planet's going to be fine. The planet, might take a few million years, but life will continue in some form. Consciousness will continue in some form. Maybe it turns out to be an enlightened cockroach planet. Who knows? Whether we make it is like, okay, that's the question, because we're just now beginning to witness whatever it is that we have unleashed on the environment, of which COVID is a symptom. Right? It's a symptom of our relationship to nature. So when I think about all that, I think like the only thing that can get us out of this hole that we have dug ourselves into collectively, it's nothing short of a leap in consciousness, a revolution, like a spiritual revolution, something that's going to shift the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about each other, and the way we think about and relate to the earth. And so that's what my work is designed to do, is to support that our collective, call it awakening or transformation, whatever word you want to use.
Where can our listeners find your books at?
Yeah, the books are available. The book's available wherever books are sold. So you can get it on Amazon, or you can order it at your local bookstore and just wait a little bit for it to get there if you want to support your local bookstore. In terms of reaching me, probably my website is the best way to do that, and that's soulfulpower.com. And for your audience, if they'll go to soulfulpower.com and get on my email list, and we all know how easy it is just to click unsubscribe down the road if it doesn't work for you. And I'm not going to take it personally, so no worries. And so by getting on my email list, we'll send them a sample chapter from the book, and it's one that talks about what it means to live heroically in the 21st century. We'll send them some of the power practices we've been talking about. And we'll send them a guided meditation. It's a short teaching and guided meditation that I created last year, like in the middle of the pandemic, to help us navigate these times of, these chaotic times of fear and uncertainty, and how we move more into trust.
Okay, great. Orianne, do you have anything?
I really appreciate this. It's a great message, and thank you so much for being here as a guest on our podcast. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for having me as a guest, and thank you for doing the show. Like I know that in your willingness to do that, many lives are being reached. So thank you.
Thank you
for that. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by Myono, featuring their multifunctional USB microphone, very light, portable, affordable, and great for podcasters, and available on Amazon.